Hi, I'm Doug Austin, and I'm the editor of eDiscovery Today, a daily blog about eDiscovery, information governance, cybersecurity, data privacy, and artificial intelligence trends, best practices, and case law. Welcome to another edition of eDiscovery Today's Thought Leader interview series, where we interview thought leaders in eDiscovery and related legal technologies. Today's guest is a computer scientist who has more than 10 years of research experience in artificial intelligence and machine learning. Igor Labutov of Epiq. Welcome, Igor.
Thanks, Doug. Great to be here.
Good to have you. Before we get started, let me introduce Igor. Igor Labutov is head of Epiq AI Labs. He is a computer scientist with a strong interest in developing machine learning algorithms that learn from natural human supervision, such as natural language. As I mentioned, he has more than 10 years of research experience in AI and machine learning. Igor earned his PhD from Cornell and was a postdoctoral researcher at Carnegie Mellon, I'll get that out, where he conducted pioneering research at the intersection of human-centered AI and machine learning. Before joining Epiq, Igor co-founded Layer AI, where he applied his research to develop transformative technology for the legal industry. Ready to get started, Igor?
Let's go.
Okay, so let's start with this question. We see various reports on how quickly AI is being adopted by the legal community. What have you seen, and how does Epic encourage adoption of AI with your clients?
Yeah, so I think it's an interesting journey, and I think there's a lot of learning happening very quickly, kind of in the context of first generation, let's call AI or really basic machine learning like TAR, that I think took a while to get adopted. But I think that was a great learning experience that kind of helped people get a little bit more comfortable. And as generative AI is entering picture, I think the expectation maybe that I had was that it would be the first mover in the review space, as was kind of that first generation machine learning. But what we're seeing is tremendous interest and really tremendous adoption of AI around really the entire workflows, let's say in litigation, right? Conversational assistant around the process from day one to depositions. Companies, clients are getting more and more engaged with the process, not just of asking transactional questions, but also building models like the way that you would maybe in traditional TAR document review, but being able to do it much quicker, more efficiently. And that I think gives clients a lot more comfort in being able to experiment. So I think corporate legal departments are leading a lot of these transformations, working very closely with their law firms, and I think it's been really exciting to see how quickly these new extensions of generative AI, especially in kind of all of these different stages of litigation, how quickly they've been happening.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're really just scratching the surface on just how many ways we can you apply the technology. And so it will be interesting to see how, things develop. I think we can all agree that agentic AI seems to be the topic of 2025. So what are your thoughts about that, and how can legal functions build trust and confidence in agentic AI?
Yeah, so I think that this is a really interesting one. I think the coming back from ILTA just a few weeks ago, agentic is everywhere. Maybe a year before that was generative AI, and there are two sides to this. I think there's a lot of excitement about what agentic can bring. There's also a lot of confusion that I see kind of in the market. It's like, okay, are these two different things? And what can this new agentic concept do that generative AI couldn't? And really understanding of the entire ecosystem of all of these different AI tools and capabilities. So I think maybe I'll take a step back and just sort of define a little bit of what kind of how we see agentic AI. And really it's a spectrum, right? It's the idea of treating models, right? These models that themselves are powerful but fundamentally limited, right? They're limited in how much information they can process, the types of errors they make. Everybody is hyper focused in hallucination now, as they should be. And I think the concept of agentic AI is really almost going back a little bit and connecting the dots where we're no longer thinking about AI as this black box that maybe you connect up to an open AI API, but really seeing it as part of a larger software architecture, right? Just like we would with TAR, where it was a model, but there's a whole system around it, right? There's a workflow, information flows through it. There are different stages. And now really it's in a way the marriage of these two. It's how do you create an architecture of components which themselves are generative AI components, but that work together, do several things. I think one of them is to be able to do things end to end in many ways, right? Go through different stages of workflows, but have more autonomy in that process, that more intelligence that isn't pre-programmed, but potentially user specified. So that's kind of, if we think of that spectrum, the one extreme is fully prescriptive, right? There are all these workflows that are prescribed to being more agentic, right? To having the ability for the system to have decision points where it can rely on information that may not have been pre-programmed ahead of time. But taking a step back, I think understanding that this is a system and one of its main capabilities is going to be to make the output more reliable for people, right? To have systems that can integrate multiple models perhaps to verify each other's output, to be able to interact with users in ways that focuses the attention of the user on areas where the model may not be as accurate, right? That fundamentally requires building an architecture and system around these things. So I think with that understanding, what we're seeing is more focus now around what are the solution developers, right, doing specifically around these models? How are they addressing, when we look at the outcome, how does it impact the outcome of, say, my depot prep or my document review? And we're seeing a lot of excitement, but I think at the same time, it's being able to understand that the implications of the output of a particular agentic system really depends on what that system is built, the components that it's built from, but more importantly, the architecture that combines it together. And this really always leads my discussion around agentic is focusing ultimately on the end result and the outcome, which is how do we verify that these systems, now it creates almost an exponential growth of the different ways you can architect them, right? It creates complexity around how do you evaluate it. It becomes almost impossible to assess in that architecture what's really happening. So I think the focus should be more and more on how do we evaluate whether it's a black box generative AI component from OpenAI or whether it's an architected system, right, that is agentic and has autonomy. How does it perform end to end? What are the ultimate metrics that we care about when it comes to all of these different tasks along the litigation process, for example? So I think more clients are asking these questions now because it almost becomes impossible to go up and look up a performance of the best model as of 2 p.m. Eastern today, and tomorrow these models are going to be different. That's what's exciting, I think, is that we're finally going back to the place where, with TAR, metrics and evaluations was everything. Now we have to be thinking similarly. How do we assess these new capabilities like question answering, like the ability to generate reports in terms of quantitative metrics?
Okay. Okay, great. So obviously there's a lot of discussion about the application of AI to discovery reviews. And earlier this year, Epiq announced release of the Epiq AI Discovery Assistant. So what was your role in developing the Epiq AI Discovery Assistant, and how does it compare to other review methods and solutions?
So the Epic AI Discovery Assistant really was initially part of that first system that we developed as part of Layer and working closely with Sullivan and Cromwell, which was our incubation lab when we were part of Layer AI, and really leveraged heavily a lot of the experience and the research we had, both Bishan and myself, co-founders of Layer, around how do you understand large-scale data sets that are mostly unstructured in a way that allows you to connect facts together to make deeper inferences and connections to help with early case assessment, to be able to move that information over to review and depot prep. And that initial incubation as part of Sullivan and Cromwell was an incredible learning experience for us because we could combine sort of our academic knowledge and the skills that we had with the experience of the lawyers, obviously at S&C, but also the data on which we could develop and test the tool. And now as part of Epic, I think what's really exciting is that we're scaling up that lab concept, which is to continue to develop the capabilities of Epic AI Discovery Assistant that really going beyond that initial stage of just understanding the facts of the matter, but also being able to help with downstream tasks such as depot prep to be able to make those connections in real time to cut down significantly on the hours that an attorney would need to usually spend on preparing and connecting all these facts to ask the right questions. So Epic AI Discovery Assistant is really unifying, I would say, that litigation life cycle, and most importantly, compounding that information across time so a client could leverage the knowledge and the skills that they've already built into it into future uh, use cases for, again, Discovery Assistant.
Okay. Speaking of use cases, and you've already alluded to a couple of them, like depot prep. In addition to discovery review, what other use cases are you and Epic seeing newer AI technologies like generative AI and agentic AI being applied by your clients?
Yeah, so I think that, like I said earlier, one of the most exciting things to observe is really the use of the conversational capabilities, the chat capabilities of the platform, right? It's no longer reviewers or review managers who are going into these platforms, but it really is attorneys themselves who are starting to be able to get into the facts day one, right? And that's really the target, right? If you're starting at the beginning, you know very little about the matter, you'd like to be able to get to those key documents to be able to put together a narrative and a story as quickly as possible so it could lead to early disposition of the matter, for example, right? Early settlement. So we're seeing clients start to use the system at the very beginning and start to use the conversational capabilities, but also naturally leading to the ability to build models, to be able to train the system downstream to perform review. And also seeing a lot of use around depot prep, witness testimonies, and having it be part of that centralized platform that's able to retain those facts and work with the user. I think that has been one of the most exciting things to observe.
Yeah, I'll bet. Um, so another thing that Epic announced earlier this year was the creation of Epic AI Labs, which you lead. So what is Epic AI Labs? What makes it unique? And what notable developments have occurred so far this year?
Yeah, so the Epic AI Labs really is, I think, a very unique venture that we have within Epic. I think what's uh, one of the core principles is that we're not just a research lab. We're both researchers and builders, right? We kind of have that connection between the academic aspect of looking at what's out there in the cutting edge and the latest models that exist, the latest research and benchmarks, developing our own data sets, developing our own methodology around testing, rapidly prototyping. I would say that right now that's the most important thing, to be able to keep up with the changes, and being able to quickly deliver those things that have promise, that we're seeing actually perform well on the tasks that we want to be able to expose and deliver to the user. Being able to quickly deliver that into a product such as the Epic AI Discovery Assistant and the broader agentic architecture, I think that's one of our core principles within the lab. But aside from the research and the product development side of that, there's also the ability, that the fact that we want to be able to connect very closely with our clients, right? So we have, as part of Epic AI Labs, we have the industry partners group, we have a strategy group, we have more than 25 partners that we've added already. And the idea there, like I alluded earlier, is really to create that environment where we can have the academic side, the partnership that we have with Cornell, for example, with advisors from Carnegie Mellon, to be able to interact closely with clients in terms of the use cases that they see promise in, right? Issues that they may be dealing with that our technology and the research that we have could be immediately applicable to. And that allows for that really quick iteration, and just being able to have those face-to-face conversations and bring these two normally different groups together. I think that in the past, for us in our experience, has really worked well. But the other side of that is really also sharing our experience in how impactful it could be to have a lab environment, not even as part of an organization that's developing technologies, but also within law firms, within corporate departments. Because what's happening now is the models themselves, they kind of reach their capacity in terms of the amount of information they can process. There are fundamental limits to individual models, but the architectures that are going to be evolving around them, the products that are coming to market, there's going to be an exponential growth almost of the different tools. Every day you hear about a new tool that's out there that's supposed to work on this task or be able to achieve performance on this task that exceeds everything that's out there. And so clients are inundated with all of these different technologies. And I think one of the biggest challenges is going to be, how do you evaluate this? How do you assess whether or not this is actually something you want to bring on board? And then once it's there, how do you deal with change management around this, right? How do you convince the partners and the associates to use this and demonstrate success of these tools? And that requires, like I said earlier as well, developing really a quantitative approach to assessing that in a way that scales. Like just like we do, I think there's a connection, with sales pipelines, right, or marketing leads, right? Everything is typically tracked, assessed. There's a funnel to make sure that you're doing the most efficient job at this. And I think we should be taking a similar approach with evaluating different technologies as well. Everybody who is potentially considering it and using, especially on sensitive matters, has to be doing it more and more in that quantitative way, right? And I think the new capabilities such as question answering, generation of documents, reasoning, really don't have established benchmarks in the industry yet. That's something we're actively working towards. And as part of this group, it's really sharing that information with our clients and learning from them what is the most efficient way to help them conduct change management and evaluate these tools within their organizations.
Yeah, and you mentioned creating data sets as a part of that process. That's preaching to the choir for me because certainly data drives these processes, and you have to have realistic data to do so. So couldn't agree
Absolutely.
more. Yeah. So AI technologies have a lot of potential, but there's also a lot of hype about AI. So. What is Epic doing to develop meaningful AI solutions for the industry, and how else is Epic AI helping in those efforts?
Yeah, so I think that's a natural follow-up to the previous question that you had. Uh, I think at the end of the day, it all comes down to metrics. It all comes down to benchmarks. It all comes down to quantifying really not only, okay, this particular tool may be great at solving this problem, and here are the metrics to prove that. But what I think it also there's one thing that I think hasn't been addressed so well, which is once that tool goes into your organization, right, it becomes part of a workflow. And what we've seen with these, for example, generative AI technologies is applied to document review. Existing workflows with, if applied to those technologies, could potentially lead to wrong results just because of the way that people, for example, interpret the outputs of these systems and how they use it to inform that tool, for example, to improve. That could lead to issues such as training to the test that we have to be careful about. Or when a user gets an output from a system that has errors, right? How do they use the system as a whole to be able to validate that output? So it really is an end-to-end process. And so when people evaluate these technologies, really, I think the only way to dispel hype is to be able to quantify performance of individual systems, but also quantify performance ultimately end to end within your organization. So, and number two, I think, like I said earlier as well, working with organizations and helping understand how to measure the ultimate end to end impact these tools can have, and quantifying that as well. Because once I think that is demonstrated, just like we've seen with the first wave of TAR, that demonstration, those metrics, those results ultimately is what leads to acceptance and dispelling of that hype.
Sure, absolutely. In addition to the things you've already mentioned, what else would you like to tell our audience about what you and Epic are working on?
So I think it's again, very exciting to see the rate of adoption of these technologies. I think that already a lot, kind of we've crossed that chasm in a way that opens doors to a lot more experimentation. Clients are a lot more open to using these tools on again, not just the stages and processes where machine learning had traditionally been accepted, but also areas where people haven't even considered potentially use of AI. So, like the capabilities that we've developed in Epiq AI Discovery Assistant are so fundamental in sort of what they can do with data and around data that to us, there are next steps that go, for example, to privilege, to data breach, to cyber, to knowledge management, right? So we're expanding really all around these different areas and see these capabilities as fundamental. And I think uh, being able to demonstrate that again through quantitative evaluations and through working with clients and helping them bring these types of technologies on board is really what we're working on actively towards.
All right. Um, well, I want to thank my guest, Igor Labutov of Epiq. Thanks, Igor.
Thank you, Doug.
And I want to thank all of you for tuning in to another edition of eDiscovery Today's Thought Leader Interview Series. See you next time on the eDiscovery Today Video Network. Goodbye.